Is it possible to completely eradicate fear from your human nervous system? Not to cover it up and not to ignore it, but to be free of it completely. And if so, what would that change about our world? Well, we'll come back to that. Right now, I want to look at a very arcane and mystical word. A word that seems to cause as much confusion as it does clarity. From what I have seen personally, the word gnosis seems to have roughly 3 definitions. The first and most common is very easy to swallow. It means growth through direct experience as opposed to being taught something. An example might be experiencing 5 spatial dimensions while on a DMT enhanced state. You can describe it with words to give an idea, or you can work up mathematical equations to prove its existence. But until you have inhaled 3 lungfuls, you will not have a so-called Gnostic understanding of these 5 spatial dimensions, any more than a person can describe what Ted Drews taste like to somebody who thinks that McDonald's serves ice cream. It's got antifreeze in it. This is the reason that an apprenticeship of any trade is preferable to sitting in a class. A classroom will get you a nice little vocabulary and maybe even help you know what you're talking about. But until your hands are dirty and your mind is scattered from being out in the field, you will never truly understand the concept being taught. The second definition seems to be oceans apart from the first. It points to the Gnostic Gospels. These are the highly debated lost books of the Bible, some of which, like the Apocrypha of John, were found years after the Bible was formed, and some that, like the Book of Enoch, were removed by the Vatican for reasons unknown. But don't tie yourself up too much with particulars yet, considering that these lines are blurred across the board when considering the origins and authors of these missing books of the Bible. It seems as if some of them might have been removed on purpose for sinister reasons that we will go into later. The third definition is where it starts to get a little weird, but at the same time hit home in a very strange way. There is an ancient philosophy that lines up with many other worldly myths throughout time that parallel the idea that physical matter, being our world, was birthed from a less than perfect sentience that created our universe in an attempt to chase its own ignorant desires. The first gulp of this philosophy seems dreadful, but reaching the bottom of the cup, there is certainly a beacon of hope. Despite these 3 definitions being differentiated, they are still represented by the same word. Is this a coincidence? Is this laziness on the part of human language? Or is there a direct correspondence connecting the origins of this word and its philosophies? What do we know about fear and its effect on the nervous system and spirit, as opposed to its counterpart, love, which also is a widely used word with multiple definitions? Just like the myriad of mythologies and religions all over the world throughout time, these mysterious words can be traced back to a singularity of information. Information that, despite being abstract, can be grasped by the human mind, or more appropriately, the loss of it. So, if the word gnosis had a mascot, it would certainly be Abraxas. Abraxas holds a shield to protect him from ignorance, but I like to think of this protecting him from temptation. The head of Abraxas, being that of a rooster, is a metaphor of vigil awareness. But again, I like to look at it as symbolizing the act of waking people up, like cock-a-doodle-doo, motherfucker, good morning. I wanted to get those first 2 out of the way to illustrate the point of symbolic communication in the first place. People will jump at the opportunity to tell you what a symbol means specifically. If that is how symbology works, then you might as well just make a language for it and line it out carefully in Webster's dictionary. But we know that symbols don't read out like that. The deepest meaning of this communication is personal to you. You are the one deciphering it because, after all, you are the one responsible for applying this knowledge to your specific life and personal individuation process. If we want something to have an objective meaning, then we can just make limitations through definitions all day. But Abraxas here is subjective to you, while at the same time pointing us all in a similar direction. I mean, you can lead a horse to water. Look at that horse. The legs of Abraxas are serpents. As we've seen on a few episodes thus far, serpents are very cunning and clever. They can find their way in and out of any place or time with little effort. Abraxas keeps control of his chariot by shepherding the horses with his whip. The chariot, like in Hindu mythology, symbolizes the body, and the horses symbolize one's own will and desire. The whip, of course, being a metaphor of the control Abraxas has over this earthly vehicle. And you'll notice that the reins of the horses are oftentimes depicted being held by the mouth of the serpents. This is very interesting. So very much like our first definition of the word gnosis, Abraxas certainly does seem to represent the subjective, personal, human experience. He is either you or the personification of someone or something that you might encounter. Either way, it captures the essence of how one carries themselves in the face of adversity. The early Christians that we now call the Gnostics believed that despite errors in our world, the way of improvement is through the insight of human consciousness. They maintain that the true divine first cause of the world, or God so to speak, can be experienced through the spirit, bypassing the flaw of the craftsman responsible for it. This means to overcome the many debacles of everyday life, which is inherently built into our world, and apparently by no accident, as we'll see here soon. In his book, Wisdom of the Knowing Ones, Manly P. Hall wrote, "Death releases the divine spark from its lowly prison, but such release may only be temporary unless liberating knowledge has come to the human while still on earth." It seems the Gnostics hinted that we live within a physical prison, but the Zen masters might say that they left out the fact that we are holding the key, and well, the door is not even locked, but instead just lightly guarded by some tomfoolery of the etheric realms. What could it be that the bars of this metaphorical prison are made of? And what if these so-called bars are something that we just came up with to limit ourselves, like we do with insurance companies, for example? It has been debated in the church for millennia whether or not evil exists. The argument, of course, being that evil is just the absence of God. But this is weird considering that a God would be omnipresent in all things. So really, just like any other, the word evil is just a mouth noise that we use to point in a particular direction.